Hello and welcome back to Being Human Hidden Depths. And I'm delighted to say member of Collaboration Global, Micheal Pilla, is with us today. Micheal and I usually have a really good natter, and you might recognize him from a few months ago. He has already had a conversation with us on Being Human Hidden Depths, but I wanted to go a bit further. And you'll find out the reason why. So welcome, Micheal. Come back for part two.
Thank you, Juliet. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, so this will be fun.
Indeed. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
You can tell by your accent, you're not from my side of the pond. Whereabouts do you hail from?
I was born and raised in New York City, the Bronx, New York. To be specific, the Bronx is one of the outer boroughs of the city. It is the only part of New York City that is attached to the continental United States. So if all the sea levels rise, the Bronx will still be there. You know, we don't have to worry about everything. All the other four boroughs in New York are islands. So the people in the Bronx always took this as a point of pride, or like I
didn't realize that. I like
that.
We're
the ones who are going to be here no matter what. Yes. And it's always been a very interesting area. A lot of creative people have come out of the Bronx, like Mel Brooks and Robert Klein, and a lot for whatever reason. It seems to, at one point, it was sort of like a hotbed of creativity. Actually, hip hop was invented in the Bronx.
Wow.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, and it's also been a very, there's a few sections that are fairly wealthy. A lot of it is fairly, economically challenged, shall we say. It has one of the more famous ghettos in America, the South Bronx, also known as Fort Apache. So there've been movies made about, in the 70s and 80s. It was a lot of drug activity, and of course, that's the part of the Bronx I come from. As I would continue to ask my parents, why are we here? They never really had a good answer for that. But I said, all the places we could be,
yeah,
be here.
So you saw yourself in movies, basically, did you? When you were growing up, it's like, oh, that's where I come from.
Yeah, but not, like I was never a gang member. I was always. I got really good at avoiding. I was very stealthy. I always.
Yeah. Is that where your sense of humor comes from?
Yeah, smart mouth and fast feet. That's basically how I got around.
In that order.
Right. Really interesting. I went to like a junior high school reunion, and I'm talking to some guy, and he looks at me and he says, you were always like well groomed, like you're always sort of put together. He said, but underneath it all, you were incredibly subversive. And that pretty much summed me up. I was always looking for angles, looking for other ways of looking at things, and just sort of,
Well, you hear a lot of famous comedians, don't you, say that their upbringing, when it's from somewhere like the Bronx, is like that was their testing ground, and that's how they started. Because, as you say, a smart mouth got you out of trouble, and you could keep yourself out of the way because somebody was funny. I saw. Oh, I can't remember who it was now. Oh, I'll think of it by the end of the interview. I saw somebody being interviewed yesterday about how they were continually being beaten up at work. Lenny Henry. So I don't know if you know Lenny Henry in the States.
No.
He's a comedian from Birmingham, also from the wrong side of the tracks, and a West Indian. And he would always be beaten up daily by this big bully. Yeah. And he said, and it wasn't until he managed to do a funny quip and people around laughed, and that gave this bully, who was about to punch him on the floor again, a pause for breath, because this guy just made other people laugh. So he had a decision to go, do I laugh with everybody else or do I stop what I'm doing? So that was the beginning of him kind of being allowed to be beaten up every single day.
And I never got beat up, but that's the fast feet part. I was always, and I always, maybe I was a little too quiet as a kid, but I always managed to avoid dicey situations. I was once sitting with some guys at a job, and they had all been raised in suburban or rural areas, and they were talking about things they did as a kid to test their courage, and they were like jumping off of cliffs and jumping into like lakes and jumping into like stone quarries, and I'm a small man. I'm not a very large person, and they're going on all this. So they kind of look at me slyly, and it's like, and what did you ever do?
Ooh.
And I went, I rode the subway at midnight. And they go, and they look at, first they started to laugh. And then I went, have you ever ridden the subway at midnight? You know, the number 6 local through the Bronx. Would you ever do that? And they kind of thought about it for a minute, you know, and it's like, that's like the last place they'd want to be. So there's different levels of courage.
Yeah.
You know, depending on where you come from, you know.
Yeah.
The big advantage is I've learned how to size up. Like I could size up an entire subway car in 5 seconds. You know, I'd walk into the car, take one look around, and I know exactly either to keep going or where to sit or who to avoid, or I don't, you just pick up, it's like spidey senses, you know, it's just something you kind of develop in that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, having grown up, I mean, we talked about this before, but I'm an East End girl, London. And it's, I don't think the tube trains were quite so bad as I don't remember them being bad unless I was that innocent at the time. But yeah, you certainly knew places to avoid. But also, if you were in town, if you're in London, and various places that were like no-go areas, and if you ended up there by accident rather than design, you could feel the difference in the area. You know, you could see a guy 100 yards ahead of you and go, I'll cross the road, I'm not going to go past, I'm going to go over that way and walk that way. There is, like you say, there's something on the back of your neck that goes up, go, this isn't a good idea.
Yeah, I can't explain it, but there's always, I've sort of developed that early, you know, for like a survival, you know.
So did your mother know that you were riding the subway at midnight?
Well, this was if I got older, you know. Mom pretty much kept too much of a tight rein. Yeah, she was a little, she kept such a tight rein that I would say, so why don't we move? I mean, you know, if you're so, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, there were like her family was close by. She didn't want to be the one to leave the family, so we basically stayed there as the neighborhood deteriorated. You know. It was a weird situation.
Yeah, no, I feel it. We had the same. It's like, well, let's move, and it's like, well, there's your nan, and then there's your auntie.
Yeah, right. So what happens? Everyone else left, and we were the last ones there. And it's like, great.
Yeah. I even left my mum. She was still there when I left. So,
okay.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? So, when you say there were gangs in the Bronx back then, was it something like from school that happened? I mean, how did you keep your head out of that gang?
Those are street gangs. Those are street gangs. They were like the Savage Nomads was the more famous ones. But the Young Lords was a Hispanic street gang that then got involved in politics or whatever. The Black Panthers, I think, had a chapter.
Yeah.
By the same token, so did the Hells Angels. So, you know, it was like equal opportunity, you know, scumbags, you know. So it was
so was it
I went to a really good school. I went to a school in the North Bronx,
right?
A Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx. It was the Archdiocese of New York. It was like their jewel, as it were. And I had a very interesting experience in Catholics. I went to Catholic school in the 70s, and it wasn't all that oppressive. I mean, a lot of the teachers were very, very liberal, you know, and maybe compared to some public schools, there was a little bit more emphasis on discipline, but it really wasn't all that, you know. I didn't feel like we were in prison, you know. I mean, didn't want you smoking, didn't want you getting pregnant, you know. There were certain lines they didn't want you to cross.
Most schools at that point, yeah.
Yeah, but for the most part, it was, you know, they pretty much it was a school, you know, and they encouraged learning and education and stuff like that. So
it was good, wasn't it? Rudy Giuliani that was the mayor in the 80s.
Well, he was the mayor in the 90s.
The 90s. He was attributed with cleaning up, wasn't he? Getting it sorted.
Yeah, well, it was him and his first police commissioner, a guy named I think it's Robert Bratton, who then became police commissioner in Boston, who came up with the idea of sort of neighborhood policing. And the idea was, like, if you're in a neighborhood and you see a lot of broken windows, it leads you to believe that nobody is looking. So basically, the police started to enforce a lot of quality of life infractions. And then the other thing he instituted was like a weekly meeting with all the precinct captains, and they all had to give reports as to what was going on in their precinct. So everybody was suddenly held accountable. Because before that, police corruption in some parts of New York was rampant.
Oh, wow.
Strictly because of drug money. I mean, there've been many movies made about. There was this one precinct in Brooklyn, the 7-7, that was like, you know, it's basically the cops were working for the drug dealers. You know, it was
wow.
Yeah, it was a wild time. Yeah.
So it makes you realize that it is possible to do something about these people. You know, when you see different countries that seem to be overrun by these drug gangs. I mean, we were on holiday in St. Lucia, and part of the island was almost like a no-go to tourists because of the situation over there. And it's like, it is possible to turn it around. It's just, you've got to have the right people in the leadership roles in order to put in these things. Now, what you've just described as having weekly meetings, no broken window policy, which I think a lot of people are aware of, and making people accountable. Not rocket science, is it, really?
No, but it's the political will to do that.
Exactly.
And the political will not to take all the money you're being offered. You know, people are being offered, you know, the drug money is incredible. You know, the amount of money they have available to them. It's basically buying, sell anybody. So to have the wherewithal to say no to that, that there's something bigger, you know.
But there are more good people than bad, I think, in the world.
Yeah, but good people got to get busy.
Yeah,
you know? That's just it. Yes, there may be. There's that famous quote from Churchill.
Which one? He has so many.
The only thing it takes I'm going to paraphrase it, but the only thing it takes for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what we have to remember, that is like, there's 99% of the good people and only 1% of the bad. So we really are in the majority, and we just, if we don't want to be walked all over, we
gotta get busy, right? I mean, that was the whole. It was during the 2016 election. I mean, you know, you can't have a discussion like that without bringing up Trump. But during the 2016 election, I had a lot of friends who didn't know if they wanted to vote, didn't know if they could vote for Hillary, didn't know if they could trust her. I mean, you know, all this sort of nonsense. It's there were some young people who just saw her as an old line corporate Democrat, and I would say that's true, but she's running against Satan. I mean, when you stack, I'll concede all of your points, but look who's on the other side. You know, you can't, you know, and no, people honestly didn't realize what he would try to get away with until he was in office. They just thought he'd be, even Obama, who I like, but I have some issues with. Even Obama said, well, I'm sure, you know, if Trump gets elected, somehow the majesty of the office, you know, will bring him around. And it's like, who are you kidding? I mean, you know, you've just never dealt with people like this, you know.
Yes, exactly. It has been a strange journey, and it's still going on, isn't it? It's like a circle.
Yeah, he won't go away. I keep voting for, you know, wishing for an aneurysm or something, but he's still here. But what was I going to say? The thing we found out in this country was so much of what we take for granted as presidential behavior is not written down. It literally, right, a lot of it is always dependent on the character of the president. I mean, that's the reason why George Washington was the first president, and everybody thought people would follow, and to the most part, people did follow in his example until this bozo came up. And I mean, I told people a lot of what he did was reprehensible, but very little of it was illegal. Until he started like taking documents out, and you know,
he just did what he could get away with, and he kept on getting away with it. And people were
because again, it was well, and also his party refused to discipline him or put any checks on him. They just follow him because he had such you know, support.
Yeah.
If we have another hour at some time, we can talk about talk about the Electoral College, and I can basically, you won't have to say anything. I can go on for a whole hour about that.
It's I mean, I'm fascinated by the whole change of the city of New York and how it changed. So potentially going down the wrong way again. But also, if you look at the whole country and then you look at the whole world, we're all copying each other along the way, you know. I mean, my upbringing at the East End of London, you'd go to school and the fire alarm would go, and it wasn't because there was a fire, it was because there was a bomb alert, because the IRA.
Oh, wow. Oh, right. Yes.
You know,
yes.
so that was
right.
a kind of my schooling was the, oh yeah, we've got to get out and it's another bomb alert, and no, we can go back in now, and we're like, really?
I know, right?
So,
are you sure?
Yeah,
Did you
it was
everywhere?
and we didn't go sightseeing in London because, you know, there was always a bomb going off somewhere. It's just, and yet the country, cities can change, people can change, country and the world can change.
Right.
But again, like you say, we'll do another one. This is another hour going. What the other reason I wanted to bring you in on a podcast is because I'm really excited that you have created this wonderful book, You Ought to Be in Business. I can't say it in the way you say. Can you say it for me, please? It doesn't sound right.
You ought to be in business.
You ought to be in business. And it's one of those books that it's a bit like my first book that I wrote, which was from desperation to inspiration and 12 simple steps. It's like the basics of your getting yourself into business, but it's the stuff that people don't tell you. It's the stuff that people assume that you know. It's the stuff that you kind of like, oh gosh, yeah, I've got to do that as well. Oh, flip, how do I do that? When do I do that? And what's it about? But what you've done is you've written it with New York humor, and it shows that you come from the Bronx. Like you say, all the good comedians come from there. And you've got a lot of history to bring this book to life because you've experienced it, haven't you? You've started on.
Yes, like I said, it's not a memoir. You know, it's not a how I did it book, but it is I like to present it as a humorous food for thought. So there's some anecdotes, there's some things from my own experience, and then there's some actual information. Like I have an entire chapter about getting started and, you know, what legal documentation you have to have and you know, other considerations, you know, setting up your finances, looking for people to help you, deciding on what your business is going to be. You know, that's a whole bunch of chapters. What is your business going to be? You know, later on, I do get into branding and networking. I get into, you know, it's that this part's changed a little bit because of AI, but the chapter is working for yourself doesn't mean you have to work by yourself, you know, and it's a sort of advice on hiring either freelance or full-time or relatives or even pets. I recommend there are instances where you can hire pets. I had a toy poodle named Decker who was sort of like the concierge of the office. He told me when people were outside and you know, when it was time to go to lunch, and you know, he sort of was like a little companion there, you know.
Perfect.
Hiring your kids and stuff like that, you know. I do want to read one little passage at the beginning of the book, which kind of sums up.
Go for it.
And I've actually borrowed this from somebody, but
all the good stuff's borrowed.
Right, but anyway, here, because before we begin, a budding entrepreneur falls into a hole on the way to an important meeting. With these sorts of stories, it never pays to ask how or why he fell into the hole. But anyway, he falls into a hole and frantically calls for help. A tech billionaire passes by and hears the cries. Whoa, dude, what are you doing down there? I really don't know. Can you help me? Sure, I'll Venmo you some cash and you can buy your way out. What's your handle? Well, the billionaire takes out his smartphone, transfers the funds, and moves on. Wait, pleads the entrepreneur. The reception here is really lousy, and I can't tell if the transaction went through. A little while passes by, and a shaman passes by, and hears it cries. My goodness, how did you ever get yourself into such a terrible situation? I really don't know. Can you help me? Why, of course, the shaman starts to pray. Great Spirit, who lives within us all, fill this soul with your love so that he may walk among us again. Pleased, the shaman smiles, nods, and moves on. Thanks, I feel a lot better, but I'm still stuck down here. Finally, a third person passes by, hears the cry, and immediately jumps into the hole. Why'd you do that for? Now we're both stuck down here. Don't worry, the third passerby said. I've been down here before. I know the way out. So that's kind of like my, I've been down here before and I know the way out. So
that's nice. And it is so true, isn't it? Because when you first start, everything's bright and shiny, but you've got this I don't, well, I say you, I had this feeling that I never knew enough. I never knew, and I always thought there was some sort of cryptic thing that I should be doing that I wasn't doing. It's like, oh yeah, you got to get your website. How do you do that again? Oh yeah, you got to get business cards. Where do I get them done? Oh, I've got to have a plan. Oh, what's my plan? Oh, I've got to have a vision, and I've got to have the legalities, and I need an accountant. I haven't earned a penny, but apparently I need an accountant, and it's all this stuff you should have. Where in reality, I got my first paying gig without a website, without an accountant, without a business bank account, blah, 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 nothing, just in a conversation. She went, right, you're hired. I'm like, okay, great. So sometimes it can be much, much, much simpler than.
Well, also nowadays there's all these. When I started writing this book many years ago, and people who were writing books about starting a business were invariably ex-corporate executives with money and connections, what have you.
Yes.
Now, however, you have like a horde of business coaches.
Yeah.
Each with a symbol or a system, rather. There's some guy has a 10x system. There's another guy has the lead the life of a warrior system, and everybody's got this kind of a system. And I think the result a lot of these to make people feel stupid. Make people feel like,
no, you're right.
I didn't know I was a warrior, you know what I mean? Instead of sort of focusing on the real, nitty and the gritty, so.
And then they're getting stuff done, and focusing on what do you need now? What do you need now? Rather than, I'm going to do this 10-year plan. Well, this week's
a lot of that comes in handy, but I think once you've started, you got to make sure you're doing something that someone will pay you for.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got a good idea.
You may have this great idea,
Yeah. So many people have the idea in their head and they don't even test it out. They don't even ask.
Right. Well, they don't know how, or they're just not, So I do have some things here, like I have the 5 reasons you might start your business.
Go for it.
The first one is downsizing. And the subtitle to that is, thank you for all your hard work. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. You're basically. And the second reason is invisibility. You've been working at a company for so long that you're now, they now equate you with the furniture and the ficus plant. You're just basically there, And the next one is momentum. This is my favorite, momentum. Right. That's when your full-time job is interfering with your side hustle.
Yes, everyone should have a side hustle, for sure.
But I mean, like, you can't get to it because you get this full-time job. I mean, who needs it?
Yeah.
Finally, talking about the vision thing. People have a vision, which I encourage people to try it out, but you have to keep in mind that your idea may be a generational game changer or a complete waste of time. But how are we going to know? And then finally, there's just I refer to this as your time has come. You spent your career working for a company. A lot of people are retiring earlier with a nice lump of cash. This might be the time to take some of that money and invest it in yourself.
That is very true, isn't it? How many people do that? Is that they'll spend money on their car or they'll spend money on their house, but when it's actually investing in you in order to generate something that can be really of value later on down the line, we're very loath to do it because it's the confidence thing, isn't it? It
seems risky, but if you've been successful doing what you're doing, I know someone who's a very successful marketing consultant, and he's afraid to go out on his own. But he's one of these people where he walks into like some sort of an industry meeting. Everybody knows who he is. He doesn't know anybody. He doesn't know.
It's interesting.
He's the one to know, Then one of my other favorite chapters is what I like to refer to as the entrepreneurial journey, the journey from newbie to the CEO of you. So I've sort of adapted these various stages of grief. Anger, denial. But for the entrepreneur, those stages are euphoria, denial, panic, bargaining, acceptance, and billing. So when you've gotten to billing, you've arrived.
You've cracked it. And don't they say a vast percentage of businesses don't last beyond the first year? So if you're in year 2 or year 3.
People get fed up. Like I said, there's a chapter about getting yourself organized. I came up with this system for a very simple metaphor for managing your business, which I refer to as the four horsemen of business management. And it's don't let managing your business get medieval on you. And the four horsemen are cash flow, client acquisition, project management, and the most important, client management.
Yeah.
People realize they need to manage their clients. Otherwise, you know, you're no longer working in your business, you're working in their business.
It's and I love the clarity that you bring to it, because there are so many things, so many aspects of running your own business, and it's too easy to get stuck in the do rather than actually bringing the money in and doing the servicing and working for your clients.
Right.
Instead, you're just running your business and you forget about the reason why you stopped that other job, that day job you had, was to do the doing that you love doing. But all of a sudden you're doing the admin, you're doing the accounts, you're doing the reconciliation.
It's overly complicated, you know.
Yeah. So
I do have a good story about managing your client. I don't know if you had this guy. There was a guy on TV here a number of years ago called the Dog Whisperer.
Yes, Caesar Milan.
Caesar Milan, right? Well, I basically used several of his principles in managing my clients.
Oh.
And the two most important principles were pack leader does not explain, pack leader does not ask for permission.
Right.
The idea is to be the pack leader in your project. And this actually worked. I mean, I was shocked. I had a client who was literally a pit bull. He looked like a pit bull. He was short and stocky and he growled all the time. And people were kind of intimidated by him. And I was a little put off too. So, you know, I go to one meeting. So what I did is just in a very, very confident, matter-of-fact way, told him what we were going to do. And the funny thing is with people, if you approach people that way, it triggers something. I could tell, like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't because something primeval.
Yeah.
Like he was face to face with a pack leader, you know, and it's like, and he kind of went along with the whole thing. And the best part is a big part of their business was being ecologically responsible.
Right.
So he wanted to know if we were doing was, you know, earth friendly. And I told them, I said, we're printing a brochure. It's on recycled paper with soy ink. So you want to know, well, is that any good? And I go, Alan, when I'm through with this brochure, you'll be able to eat it. You know, so basically. And that was that thing. But he didn't give me any trouble once I took that direct approach, you know.
I thought you were going to say it was about rules, boundaries, and limitations. That's the Caesar Milan triple whammy. But I guess that works as well, actually, for business.
Well, but yeah, right, it does. Yeah, but it's about being that gets all rolled into being pack leader.
Yeah, for sure.
The fact is you are calm and assertive. That's the other part.
So I would imagine coming up to Christmas, this would be a great present for somebody who's stuck in the corporate world and has been meaning to do something about that idea they've had for quite a long time.
Yes, right.
Show us the copy of the cover, so that I know this is an audio podcast as well. But
I think it's blurry.
Oh, it's a shame.
Because of the blurriness.
There we go. You got it. Perfect in front of your face.
The only part that's not blurry. Yeah,
if you want to go onto the YouTube, YouTube channel and find it.
Easy, not threatening, not driving yourself crazy, entertaining introduction to starting your own business.
Love it.
There are plenty of books.
Where can people find it, Michael?
Oh, on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. And just if you can't remember the name of the book, just remember my name, Michael Pilla, and it'll come right up.
Brilliant. Perfect. And like I say, I think it's a perfect Christmas present for people to give to that person that's been talking a lot about doing something, but actually hasn't got around to it. And even if you've already started your business, this is going to have loads of stuff in there that is going to be useful.
I say in the book that there are plenty of business books.
Yeah.
About writing your business plan and setting up your succession plan and, you know, shredding documents and all that other stuff, you know. So this is more or less my overview in a you know, very entertaining wrapping, you know.
It's going to give you a good giggle as well, I'm sure. And we're lucky at Collaboration Global that Michael's actually given us one of his chapters, so that we've already had a little sneaky peek inside that as well in our newsletter. So if you did want to get hold of the newsletter, you're more than welcome. Just get in touch with me, Jill, at collaborationglobal.org, and I will pop you on that list. Or if you want to meet Michael, he comes regularly to our guest sessions. And he's coming up soon to be a presenter as well on one of our guest sessions. So if you find, if you go to collaborationglobal.org, you can find out how to book on to a guest session. It doesn't cost anything to be a guest there. And we have amazing speakers with lots of different topics. I believe, I can't remember when you're coming up now for the next one, or go to Eventbrite and look for Collaboration Global and you'll find us there as well. So Michael, any last words before we go about the book, or who you'd love to be reading it? Who do you think would be the perfect person for this book?
Well, you know, I started my business. I like to tell people I started with a laptop, you know, a card table, and a mild sense of desperation. So I think specifically people who, I think both ends of the spectrum. I think people who have thought about doing this but weren't sure what was involved or how hard it is to get going or what the steps are. But I also think people who've been in business for a while might find this as a breath of fresh air, you know, as a, you know, I'm not a warrior, you know, consultant, you know, I'm not telling you to go live in the woods for 3 months and come up with a brilliant idea. I literally have no patience for people like that, you know, but basically this is just like a, you know, regular person and a very straightforward view of getting your business going.
Perfect. Absolutely. I think we could all do with that, because even if you think you're in that game and you think you know what you're doing, there's always a time when you're like, what was that? What happened there? And it's just nice to touch base with some common sense and some fun and some realization that actually you probably know more than you think you do. So I thoroughly recommend it. Thank you, Michael. It's been an absolute joy having this conversation. Thank you for
same here.
part 2. And hopefully the Bronx will always be free from those horrible people that used to take the mickey out of you. And we will catch you again soon. Okay.
I encourage anybody to reach out to me if they got questions or comments or whatever. I'm always happy to email or talk to people. So. And
what's the best, or LinkedIn presumably, but what's the best email for you?
Oh yeah, LinkedIn is good, but the best email for me is Micheal, Michael, at clicks, CLIX 4 TIX TIX.com. That's my that's a little like my arts and culture division, as it were. So
brilliant. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate it. We'll see you.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you for having me on again. All right.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye.